All right. Believe that we are started now as attendees are ticking up in the numbers. Hello, welcome to another MetaCell webinar. We really appreciate you joining us today for our discussion about cloud workspaces and how it can assist your research. My name is Stephen Larson. I'm the CEO and co-founder of MetaCell, and I'm joined by a very talented group of researchers that we've been working with for quite some time. And we're here to talk about not only their individual case studies, but also to extract from that ways in which using workspaces on the cloud can really help research move forward, whether it be through collaborating on data, collaborating on simulations, collaborating on specific software tools, having a place online that is not one's local computer, that is easy and convenient to access, is turning out to be increasingly helpful. But we also want to make sure that we get to your questions. So during the course of this conversation, if you would like to type questions for us into the chat, I will be happy to MC those questions to our illustrious panel as we go. So without further ado, let me allow the panelists to introduce themselves.
So hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Jones. I'm an associate professor in the neuroscience department at Brown University. And my lab has created a software called Human Neocortical Neurosolver, which is a large-scale neuromodeling software that's designed to study the circuit-level mechanisms that can generate human EEG and MEG signals. And we've worked with MetaCell on a number of fronts. Today, I'm going to talk about how we've used their cloud resources for helping educate the community on how to use the software.
Hello, my name is Salvador Dura Bernal. I'm an assistant professor at the State University of New York Downstate in Brooklyn. My lab also develops a software tool that is used to build very detailed, large-scale models of the brain circuits. And we have worked with MetaCell for several years now to build a very nice graphical interface for people to use this tool and build their own models. And we've also used the tool ourselves to build several very detailed models of different brain circuits.
Hi there. I'm Andrew Hardaway. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurobiology. Sorry, Porg. My lab is full of basic neuroscientists, and we are studying the neural circuits that mediate eating behavior in the hopes to inform better therapeutics for obesity, type 2 diabetes, and eating disorders. And we've been working with MetaCell for over a year now to employ large-scale calcium imaging in freely behaving animals.
Hi there, I'm Porg Gleeson. I'm a principal research fellow in University College London in the UK. And my main research focus is on creating the infrastructure for making it easier for people to build and share computational models of cells and circuits in the brain. One of the main technologies I've been developing is a language called NeurML, which makes it easy to standardize these models and share them. And the platform we've developed is called Open Source Brain. And this is specifically intended to make it easy for people to come along through their web browser, get access to these models, actually run simulations of these models and compare them to data. And we've been working with MetaCell for many years now, building the web interfaces for Open Source Brain. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. Thanks.
Great. Thanks to all the panelists for joining us on this journey today. So I'm going to say a little bit more about what we're assembled here, why we're assembled here, and the themes of it. As a company, we've been lucky enough to work with lots of different kinds of organizations over the last 11 years of being in business, almost 12. And that's ranged from very large pharma companies and many universities and hardware companies. And we've even worked in the healthcare sector some. And the common theme generally tends to be, folks that are working to better understand the living systems, whether it's neuroscience, whether it's biology, whether it's doing some form of drug discovery, whether it's trying to improve the healthcare system. We get really passionate about solving problems in that space. And so we have, for a long time, been experimenting with different ways in which the cloud, that group of servers that lives in large data centers that are primarily run by big tech companies, how it can be useful to researchers of all shapes and sizes and stripes and different use cases. And so so I wanted to say, what is a cloud workspace? What is kind of the idea of it? Obviously, there's many ways to create one, but on our side, what we've done at MetaCell is we've hooked together some open source technologies and stood them up on a backbone of a cloud that allows folks to use it in a turnkey manner. So it allows folks to have an account, log in, and do work there. But on top of that, that's just a technology platform. On top of that, we have been thinking a lot about not just here's a technology, but what are the problems that are solved by it. And so we've assembled this panel here to talk to you about different ways in which using a cloud workspace or having software on the cloud has helped them do various things. So that workspace itself includes a customizable stack. So for those not fully up on software engineering terminology, stack is just referring to the set of tools that you have available to you that are running in this computer that are in the cloud. And so one thing that we can do is that we can work with different researchers to customize exactly which applications are going to show up once they log in and they connect with this computer on the cloud. It allows for collaboration in a virtual manner. I'm a big fan of in-person collaboration too. I've been very glad to be getting back to it in this post-COVID era. However, virtual collaboration still is very, very useful. Just reducing travel costs and things like this. So there's still very much a place for people to have their research data living in a unified place that lives online, as opposed to having to bring physical computers together to do that work. A cloud workspace in our formulation of it specifically is combining, for those of you who are familiar with some of the techier technologies, a Jupyter hub launcher that allows for Jupyter notebooks to be combined, allows Python or R code to be run on a nice descriptive panel notebook with Linux desktop, which allows kind of more of a desktop environment with icons that you can click on, easy access to a file system, graphical user interfaces for things that are outside of a notebook environment. And then we also combine it with cloud storage to allow for things like Dropbox and OneDrive and Box.com and SharePoint to be data sources that we can then sync to the workspace and now have access to the data that are there. And so these three technologies coming together, along with an authentication system so that you can log in and individually address different notebooks, is what we have been using and developing over some time now. And various folks here on this call have interacted with this specific incarnation, but in general, everybody here has been benefiting from technologies that are put together in this way. I also wanted to mention data security. So we use industry standard authentication authorization systems to ensure that people can't just hack into the workspace. That's really important. And we're also resting this on top of Google Cloud, which uses a lot of, again, industry leading standards for data security and server protection. And then the last bit is scalable on demand. And so the scalability needs of different use cases vary quite a lot, but there are definitely circumstances where researchers find it much easier to ask us to simply increase the either make a dozen of the same workspace instantly and have a dozen or 2 dozen or 3 dozen users suddenly have their own independent workspaces and then take them back down, or to use one workspace that then gets scaled up with a lot of more storage and more CPU than you would get by default, and to be able to do that in a custom way. So it doesn't mean that costs are skyrocketing as a result of it. So we're really good at that as well. Obviously, cloud is scalable, but it's these days, it's kind of the work of an engineer to make sure that you're scaling in the right way and that you're interfacing with the back end of that. So we just present that as just tell us what you need and we'll help you with that. Okay. So 6 ways to use cloud workspaces, and then I'm going to turn over to our panel. One way to use a cloud workspace, data science as a service. So you'll hear a little bit later about getting access to expertise of a data scientist to help analysis that would be otherwise harder to access. And of course, you can always just get on a Zoom call and talk to people that you happen to know. But what the workspace does is it actually provides a place where the work happens that both sides of the collaboration can actually log into and see. And so both people can have the exact same environment. They are logging into the same environment in order to do collaborative analysis together, which is very powerful and can be very helpful. Way 2, data standardization sharing as a service. This is something that we've been standing up working with researchers who want to conform to NIH DMS policies, for example, who need some help navigating repositories that are out there, Figshare of the world, Dandies of the world, that basically would like to not have to worry about all the things that go into creating the right metadata or things like this. So that's another thing, again, that a workspace can help compared to, just send me some files on Dropbox and then do some stuff and write some scripts. And so having the workspace as the intersection point can be very helpful. Educational workshops. You'll also hear about this. So where the attendees are actually interacting with a research tool to advance their research, as opposed to just seeing a talk with slides and seeing an interface and imagining how they might use it. We've now carried out several workshops of this kind, and again, you'll hear more about these, where without the workspace, it would have been a big pain to get the users to actually have to interact with the software. Workspace is built into online repositories to work with data. That's the fourth way, a fourth way to work with cloud workspaces. So meaning, when folks have, data that's been all consolidated and organized, tagged, and based on ontologies and put up, in the cloud, sometimes it's a little challenging for users to figure out which bits they want to take out, then go and do some kind of additional research with that. So, so some organizations like the idea of being able to have a place where their users can go and do data science that is connected to their repository directly, maybe using a query library of some kind like that. Workspace is built into online repositories to run simulations. So in the computational neuroscience and computational biology spaces, and you'll hear more about this, this is also a very useful thing, again, for the same reason, to not have to go and take all of the data out again and then reload in a different environment, but to be able to run it in an attached way. And then finally, as a collaboration point, so we focused on data science as a service, like getting access to a specific individual, but we've also seen cases in which, labs can talk to other labs, or labs can talk to companies, right? Or companies can talk to companies and talk to each other in a way where they are, again, joining on literally the same computer to jointly run code and to see the effects of it. Okay, ran a little bit longer than I wanted to, so I'm going to now hand it over to Stephanie to talk about her use case.
Yeah, so our use case was for education and running workshops using our software. So as I briefly mentioned, we created this software called Human Neocortical Neurosolver. That's designed to bridge non-invasive human EEG and MEG signals to the underlying cellular and circuit level activity that's creating these signals. And the nice thing with computational neuromodels is that you can have a model that has specificity both at the individual cell and circuit level and at this macro scale recording level. But in creating this model, it's a really large scale neuromodel, and we've designed it to study some of the common signals like ERPs and low frequency oscillations that you measure with MEG and EEG. And we've created tutorials and workshops to teach the community how to do this. And so a lot of what we do in distributing the software is running these hands-on workshops. And when we first started this, we realized that there's lots of challenges in doing that. One is everybody has to install the software on their system. I should mention there's two versions of the software. One has a graphical user interface, and the other has a Python interface that can be run through Jupyter Notebooks. The Python interface is really easy to install. It's one line of code. The graphical user interface is a little bit more challenging, depending on which operating system that you have. And we spend a lot of time helping individual participants troubleshoot getting the graphical user interface installed. The other big challenge we've had is that because it's a large-scale model, the simulation times are widely varied depending on the resources you have on your local machine. And so we'd be running an interactive hands-on seminar, and some people's machines would, get the solution as soon as we're seeing it, and others were lagging behind, and it just created a lot of challenges. And so we worked with MetaCell for them to host the software, both versions, the graphical user interface and the Python interface, on their cloud resources. And then they could just, for the graphical user interface, click an icon and the software opened up in real time. We're running through simulations and the software is running and the participants are seeing the output. Then we also had a part of the workshop where we went into the Jupyter Notebooks and ran through the Python interface. And we were able to do that all in one, really easy to use compact space, where from the user's end, they had to sign up for an account at MetaCell using their email address, and then they could go right into the web and log in and use the resource. And it was worked out very well for us. We've done this now for, I think, 3 workshops with numbers of participants varying between, 10 to 30, and they're all international, right? So we have people from all over the world that's accessing this at the same time with the same speed. It's been very stable and reliable. And so it's been a really great way for us to educate the community about how to use this software tool. And then they can go download it, and we have online resources and everything else to continue to support them. But as a starting place, having this mechanism to all run it together in a very easy to use environment has been really, I think, transformational for us.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. And yeah, with software that are trying to get at really complex data and models, what shouldn't be complex is getting into it in the first place. These tools are built, to have very specific use cases. And I think that reducing that barrier to entry in this space in general is really important. So really happy that these workshops have been working out. As I turn to Salvador, I will just say for folks listening, hope you guys are getting inspired by some of this. Please do start typing in questions as you have them. They won't interrupt us. Don't worry. We'll just start to collect them, and I'll use my discretion to either inject them at the end of each person's case study, or we've also reserved some time at the end. So don't be shy. Feel free to ask questions as you have them. And with that, I will turn it over to Salvador.
Thank you, Stephen. So yeah, I mentioned before, our lab develops this tool called NetPine, where the idea is to build models of different brain circuits at multiple scales. So the tool facilitates incorporating data from the molecular level up to the cellular, and even connectivity at the network scale. What we try to do with the tool is make it very easy for students, researchers, clinicians, experimentalists to actually build these kind of models, which are, if you actually code them programmatically, it's pretty complicated, but we developed together with MetaCell this very nice graphical interface to enable the whole process. So using this tool, you can define the different components of the model at all the different scales in a very easy way. You can then simulate the models. You can run what's called parameter optimizations to sort of explore what's going on in the model. And you have a lot of built-in analysis and visualizations that you can do after you run the simulation, and also to explore the connectivity of the network. So in this figure that we're seeing here, we are seeing this graphical interface with an example 3D representation of several realistic neurons that are taken from the actual brain of a mouse. And we see their actual physiology, so how they're responding to electrical stimuli in the brain, here in the right-hand side. And we're also seeing some connectivity, how the different cells are connected. So the tool is already being used by many labs to build many different parts of models of parts of the brain, such as the cortex, the thalamus, study different diseases like schizophrenia and epilepsy, and even different treatments like drugs or electrical stimulation. We, of course, want to disseminate this tool, and we've been teaching courses every year. We do like 2 or 3 workshops or tutorials around the world. And we always had lots of issues with the installation of the tools. So at the beginning, the first years, we spent maybe half of the course just trying to install the same setup and tool in all the laptops of all the students. And we could have up to 30 students. So it was very painful and it took a lot of time. So since the last couple of years, we've been working with MetaCell and also using this platform called Open Source Brain that Porrick will talk more about, that enables to run this graphical interface for NetBind on the cloud. And the nice thing is that these workspaces allow each of the students to have their own file system with the same exact files copied from a GitHub repository, for example, and of course, exactly the same setup. So this is incredibly convenient because we just go into the course and start straight away just teaching the tutorials with all of the students having exactly the same setup. We've done this already for 2 years. We've done 4 or 5 courses, and they've been fantastic, really easy. The students were really happy to see right away some of the results in their screens. And if you go to the next slide, this is an example of the latest course that we taught this January, 2 months ago, in Chile, in South America, where we had 30 different students who had never seen this tool, but were able to right away use these workspaces on the open source brain to run these very complicated models of the brain in an easy way. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Salvador. And so this is a good moment to answer a question. Thank you for folks who've submitted questions. We got a question, what server and client software are you using? I'm finding VNC a bit difficult to work with and RDP has issues. So those are 2 tools that you typically download some special software and then you give it some address and you connect to a thing, okay? In the case of the cloud workspaces, we have done the work of that client and taken it away, and all you need is a web browser. So that is the key. The client is your web browser. It is Chrome, Firefox, whatever web browser you want to use. That is the only client. Behind the scenes, there's some nice technology there that's bridging the gap. When you're looking at Jupyter, obviously Jupyter renders directly to the browser. When you're using Linux desktop, I believe there is an RDP protocol that's being used behind the scenes, but again, you don't need to switch out of the browser environment to take advantage of it. It's just rendering directly via JavaScript to the screen. So that's what's being used on the client side. And behind the scenes, we're doing magic with Kubernetes, spinning up a cluster of machines, scaling it as needed, depending on demand. But basically, that combination of tools is packaged up in a Docker container and then orchestrated using Kubernetes. So that's basically how we're doing it. The end result is you don't have to install anything other than having the browser that you use to do anything else with, which is one of the reasons folks find it pretty useful. Okay, let's keep going. So now we'll go to Porrick, and let me just feature this website here. So Porrick, let me know when you want me to scroll.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about open source brain that you've heard a little bit about already. So the main idea with open source brain is what we want to do is make it much easier for people, neuroscientists, researchers, and indeed anybody who wants to log on to get access to neuroscience data and computational models which have been created from that data in order to try to understand the data, in order to try to create a computational model of a brain cell or a circuit in the brain. And these have traditionally been quite difficult to actually get access to. So with open source brain, what we want to try to do is find ourselves the best locations for these types of data and models out there, and then use cloud workspaces so that people can easily search on open source brain, find a computational model, find a piece of data, copy that into a cloud workspace, as MetaCell have been mentioning quite a bit, and through the open source brain interface, open up that cloud workspace, either in an application, just like NetPine, as you've just seen there, so that you can get a nice graphical interface for building your model, running your model, analyzing it all through a nice graphical interface, or in a more kind of advanced interface for programming like Jupyter Lab. Now, the advantage there is that the data that you've created, the data that you've maybe generated because of running scripts, running simulations, is all stored on your workspace on open source brain. So you can go in, log in again, you'll be able to see that data, you'll be able to share it with other users, but then you can open it in multiple different applications all through the browser. So if you do want to create scripts for analyzing your data, analyzing the simulations, for looking at lots of different types of experimental data from mice, humans, and so on, you can mix all of this together in this cloud workspace and use open source brain for actually doing your research, for sharing your research, for pointing to a particular workspace if you've used that in a publication, for example. So all of this has been enabled by open source brain. I think if you scroll down a little bit, Stephen, you can kind of see some of the applications there. So basically, yes, you get this interface where you can store the various different workspaces that you've created. You get an interface for searching through and finding data on particular repositories out there. And the whole idea with open source brain is it makes it easier to link the data, the kind of experimental data that people have released, to computational models, and hopefully refine the computational models, generate new ideas, new concepts from this kind of public data that's out there and being shared. Great.
Do you want me to scroll any other parts, or?
I think that's, yeah, I think that's, so if you go down to the end, I think there's a features, there's a link at the very bottom.
Features.
At the very bottom.
Further down, okay.
At the end, yeah, very end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Under OSB platform.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Literally at the very bottom.
Oh, okay. You want me to go to this?
Yeah, and then features, yeah. So there's some kind of introduction there that will go through the various different features, various different applications, and there's various images there of what you can do with the platform. So if anybody does want to find out more, and there's also ways to get in contact.
Great. All right. Thank you. Yes. So both these examples, well, all these examples so far are touching into computational neuroscience. Obviously, these are also need to be heavily driven by data. Now let's turn our attention to how we can do work even more on the experimental side, at the side of even directly collecting data and working with it as it's first being acquired, by talking with Dr. Hardaway.
Thanks, Stephen. So one of the goals of my lab is to really understand how specific neural circuits are recruited in real time during different aspects of behavior. And the longer I'm in this business, the more I find that this is very interdisciplinary and incorporates a lot of different modalities. So there's a bunch of kind of front-end challenges you have to face in order to acquire beautiful data. Stephen, if you just click on maybe that GIF, I think it'll start kind of showing some flashy cells, hopefully, maybe not.
Oh.
Okay, all right. The GIF didn't embed, that's okay. So there are a bunch of front-end challenges to acquiring really cool data sets such as the one that you can get a still image of here. So on the left, we're looking at what is called the version 4 open source miniscope. So this is a miniaturized epifluorescence microscope. It's 2 grams in weight and can actually sit on top of a mouse's head while it's freely behaving and performing whatever behavioral tasks that you're interested in. And on the right, you're looking at actually just a still image of what the field of view looks like. So I alluded to all these kind of front-end challenges that we face in order to perform these type of experiments. And some of those we're still working on in my own lab. But in order to like actually answer a question, you have to also face these back-end challenges. And how do we kind of decrease the inertia to answering our questions? And so at a more abstract level, I've kind of thought of this in 3 ways. And this is coming from someone who's never taken a course in computer science or a formal course in coding or computational neuroscience. The first is that we all have to get better at coding and understanding computation. The second is I could hire someone permanently in my lab that could learn these skills and help with these things, or I could partner with a collaborator. And so that's what's led us to work with MetaCell and Stephen. So for these back-end challenges, these data sets are enormous. So a 1-hour experiment from one mouse, for example, might be 10 to 15 gigabytes worth of data. So you have front-end challenges just moving that data around. But then how do you actually mine these data for interesting kind of neural phenomena? And so there have been a bunch of open source tools that have been developed to analyze these data. One of them called Minion, developed by Denise Kai's lab. So Stephen, if you just advance the slide, we can kind of look and see what that looks like. So we partnered with MetaCell to incorporate, create a cloud workspace where we can use the Minion pipeline. So this is just like one little snippet of the Minion pipeline within our MetaCell cloud workspace to analyze these data sets. So this is a very lengthy pipeline to pre-process your data and then extract individual units or cells, segment those cells, and then actually look at their changes and activity over time. So there's a lot of kind of coding that goes into this. And as we've gone through this, we've also realized that there's a need to write additional functions to actually say, okay, how are specific neurons being recruited during different aspects of behavior? So for example, when is a neuron activated? Is it activated while an animal is pursuing food or during the consumption of food? And those are the type of things that we need additional expertise and additional functions for. So one of the things that attracted me to work with MetaCell was also the team of people that are helping us are actually the people that have helped develop Minion. And so, Stephen, I think if you click over the next slide, I'll kind of like summarize kind of my experience and how this is going. So I think the first thing that has been a real advantage for working with a cloud workspace with MetaCell is that this Minion environment for analyzing these data was ready and on demand. And if I could draw a contrast, we actually worked with our own research computing team here at the University of Alabama at Birmingham to install this same platform on a cloud workspace provided by my university. And we did that, and it took a lot longer. And also when we got to the point to where we wanted to write these additional functions, we were lacking that expertise, right? So this was ready for us on demand. And the second thing was, as we grow this, as we run more experiments and we try to answer new questions, we can scale this up as needed. And the last is, again, is if I could point out that kind of expertise, is that we have people that actually develop this tool working with us to write new functions to answer these questions and really trying to streamline these back-end challenges so that we can actually answer our questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, so this does showcase a different way in which, you know, the cloud can be used to move research forward and to get expertise in the way that you need it. It's something that does not necessarily come naturally, is not something that myself as a scientist was trained to do and to use. So it really is a bit of a brand new world, even though the cloud's been around for a while. I think, you know, the exact precise ways to use it, you know, in the experimental pipeline has still been something of in development. So, so thank you, panelists. I wanted to just switch over and give a walkthrough of a little bit of what it's like on the side of interacting with that last use case of the sort of data science as a service, and just kind of give you all a sense of what that is. And then I definitely got some questions from folks. Thank you for bringing those in. Some of them we're handling by typing. Others I will, and some of them are coming in from a few different channels that I'm getting. So I will hold them right now, and we will leave some time once I'm done with this. This shouldn't take too long. But basically, we've been over the last 11 years. We've worked with folks, as I mentioned, across many different industries, but also many different kinds of data types. We think that the challenges are usually not working with any single data type, which is easy to learn, but to figure out how to connect them together and glue them together. So these are some examples of data types that we've had a chance to work with, but there's many, many others. When we're thinking about bringing data scientists to the table, we built out a small team of both data scientists and software engineers to help with that. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about Phil here. I hope he doesn't get too embarrassed with me talking about him, but Phil's been really an asset to helping us assist experimentalists. He himself just wrapped up his PhD, actually. And so he's really deep into these technologies, especially dealing with calcium imaging. So I'm going to talk about the calcium imaging use case, although I think this generalizes to others as well. So when I mentioned the Linux desktop as part of the Cloud Workspace experience, so this is a bit what it looks like. As I mentioned, it runs in the browser. So in this case, we would get on a Google Meet, maybe not a Zoom call, but a Google Meet, which also runs through the browser. It's one of the reasons that we like it, because it's all browser based. And we might do a starting conversation with a researcher to understand what their needs are, understand what data they might have, and to maybe even connect connect a data storage site that they might have into Linux desktop using a third-party tool that basically is like a Swiss Army knife for these things. So there's Phil, who would sort of help folks navigate that, have helped folks navigate that. And then later down the road, we might switch over to the Jupyter Notebook side, all of which are sharing the same file system, which is also very convenient. Sometimes that's not the case. You have these two things separated, but they're all sharing the same file system. So the same way that you can, plug the shared storage into a particular spot in your file system, you can go navigate to it inside of your Jupyter Notebook. And so is this same case study that we were talking about with Andrew, in these live sessions, in these virtual collaboration sessions, logging into the same workspace, Phil's able to show the work that he's done, and then folks like Andrew and others can go in and read the code, rerun the code, modify the code, but we sort of provided Phil's expertise as a helping hand that allows for that conversation to happen in a much more leveled up way that doesn't lead to, well, I saw it working on your system, but how do I get it to work on my system? Which over the years we found to be a key annoyance and a key blocker, and something that smoothing over makes a big difference in just the experience of even wanting to, do this kind of deeper analysis work. We utilize a Kanban board, in this case Trello. It's kind of a virtual collaboration tool that we've used for quite a while, but we can also help to sort of project manage the work of innovating and changing the data science scripts that are being run on the Jupyter Notebook. For those of us that have worked on software development, they know that we also typically use this kind of an approach to iterating on features. So when we do custom software development work, we'll very much want to put this into bite-sized chunks on cards and move them from left to right, from a to-do status to a doing status to a review status to a done status, to provide an estimate also of how much work each one of those things is going to take. And this folks tend to like because it just keeps everything nice and organized. This is also a shared tool that's available on the browser, same way. And it makes things just very visible to everybody so that it's very clear what the tasks are. And then finally, we also interact with folks on Slack. So in this case, we're looking at automatic notifications that are coming out of Trello. So moving things around in Trello, create these notifications. But also, for those of us familiar with Slack, then we can just directly carry on impromptu conversations, even just about hey, let's reschedule this meeting or whatnot in this way. So why did I show these things? These part of this started with the workspace, but then we went on to some organizational tools. I think that's because, you know, today it's not enough to just have a workspace, right? Like there are those tools that are out there. You can get them from Amazon, you can get them from Google. The workspace is not enough. It's a collaboration model around the workspace that is the real key. And as I showed you 6 ways that you can use a workspace earlier, that's what we've been finding has been really interesting. And that's the thing that's moved things forward, that even, you know, at some universities that have nascent efforts to get cloud workspaces adopted by researchers, that they're still learning and figuring out what the best models are to actually use them to move research forward. So I mention these things and offer these things to you in the community as additional pieces that you need of the life cycle of using a workspace. The workspace is not enough. It's how you collaborate around the workspace and what conversations you have around the workspace that really matters and moves the needle forward. Okay, so I will, I think that's my last slide. Yep. Okay, great. So I will get off my soapbox for now, and I will turn over to questions. Let's see. Folks got excited about some of the software and wanted demos. I don't think we have time for those at the moment, but I'm glad that there's excitement, and I'm glad, and I'm very hopeful that after this call, you'll all go out and try these different tools, especially if they're overlapping or relevant to your research. That's HNN, NetPine, OSB. They are very available to you on the web, and I think we link to some video walkthroughs that are available for that. Okay, we did get a question about pricing. So the goal of this talk isn't really to sell anybody anything. I'm really wanting to offer folks some patterns that we've used freely. But if you are interested in collaborating with us on this, as I mentioned, there's like 6 different ways to use it. There may be more. We're still figuring them out. So we really do want to have a chat with you first. Also, we offer very generous academic discounts when we work with researchers. So we're just going to figure out kind of where you're coming from. But feel free to email us at info@metacell.us. But again, that's not really my goal here. So I didn't have a pricing slide or anything to make the hard sell on this webinar.
Just in case one of the questions, I thought one of the questions might have been around if it came in during the open source brain presentation. Use of open source brain, for example, is free. You can go on there and you can use various cloud workspaces for free. There is a limit at the moment, but just because we have to pay for everybody who's on there, there's I think 300 users, so we just need to limit the number each individual user can do. But if you do need to run it for a course or anything else, we're happy to ramp up our processors and increase the numbers. If you want to use it much more, we're happy to talk to you about that, and MetaCell will be happy to talk about how to maybe make some extra part of that available for a class, a university, or anything else. So, but there's a basic level of free access to some of these if you want to try things out.
Great reminder. Yes, and HNN is open source and free to use, and NetPine is open source and free to use, also built into OSB. Yeah, thank you for that. All right, let's see. I've got questions coming from many different ways. So since Porg, you just spoke, somebody asked, how can I contribute to open source brain?
Okay, you can go to b2.opensourcebrain.org. We do have lots of links to the documentation there. Contributing, it should be quite easy there and it should be reasonably well documented how you would link a new data source or model to open source brain. Then you can go on there, you can do whatever you want for free inside your workspace, and you can also share it on the platform. If you want to contribute to open source brain itself, the source code, then please do get in contact. We'll happily have you along to our developer meetings. But the whole idea is that we set up the platform, people do interesting things on there, and we can feature things on the homepage which are quite interesting. We just want people using open source data and models and tools.
Great. One for Salvador. What's the biggest neuronal model you have simulated in NetPine, and can you run it in the cloud infrastructure, or does it require a supercomputer?
The largest we've simulated ourselves on NetPine is a model of the somatosensory cortex with around 30,000 very detailed neurons, each one with thousands of compartments and around 40 million synapses. And that definitely requires supercomputers. That takes around 5 hours on 80 cores. But we are sort of interfacing these platforms like the open source brain with ways to submit this kind of very large scale jobs to supercomputers so that you can actually run the jobs on the background, submit the jobs to Google Cloud or to the Neuroscience Gateway or to other platforms, and then get back the results and visualize them and process them in the OSB platform or one of these workspaces.
Yeah, I mean, what we'd ideally like to do is find any kind of academic or other free resources out there that we can kind of plug into. And there are some of these, like the Neuroscience Gateway, that ideally we could kind of use in the background, but make it much easier through the web interface for people to just use and plug into. Or even if they wanted to just pay for their own Google Cloud service, something like that. Ideally, we want to make it easy through the web interface. Just this is what you can do. You don't have to set anything up on your own machine, but you can access all of this through the interface.
All right, great, thank you. One for Stephanie. I think you might have said it earlier, but somebody just wanted to clarify. How many people were in the workshops that you've run for HNN?
It varied, usually around 20 to 30.
Yep. Okay. Great. And then there was a separate question: how many concurrent workspaces can be handled during a workshop? Which I think is a question for us. And the answer is we have not yet found a limit. You know, the whole idea is that we actually have enough scalability that if you give us a list of attendees, we can make a workspace for any one of them. I mean, no one's asked us to make 1,000 yet, but on the order of 100, I'm sure we can do that. There's no limit. There's nothing limiting us on that. So it's essentially either spinning up, you know, completely separate machines for it. More often, we can get away with using a cluster of resources because not everybody's using the CPU at exactly the same time. But we take care of making sure that everybody has enough CPU and memory such that they get really good performance on their on whatever application is being run. So we can just take care of that. But yeah, we haven't run into a limit yet for that. Okay, let's see. We've got another question. How do you version control code in this data science as a service context? How do you keep track of which figure analysis was made by which version of the code? Well, we do that in a few ways. One practice that we've been using for some folks is we literally create a GitHub repository, and we take the version of the code that we have in the notebook, and we also just sync it to the GitHub repository. So that's one way, and that's kind of the main way. But the thing about GitHub is that you kind of need to be a programmer to use it well. So the notebook is a very helpful way to keep track for folks that are less excited about diving in and typing in code to do that. So sometimes, just for simplicity of the humans, we might, you know, do the old standard thing of creating a separate copy of the notebook and giving it a bit of a different name so that you click in and see the notebook that has the functions that you want. But so we kind of live in both worlds. But then, of course, syncing it, backing it up with GitHub on our side, and providing that GitHub back to whomever is using it is a best practice that we do. So we make sure that months from now, we'll still remember what happened and when, and so we have proper version control. Okay, let's see, another OSB question. Can you use all features of OSB on the workspace, or are there limitations to what can be done on the cloud versus a personal computer version?
Let me see. You can use pretty much, yeah. The good thing about the tools that we have on Open Source Brain, like JupyterLab and NetPine, you can, in theory, install them on your own machine and do everything you want there. There aren't really any restrictions. So for files within your workspace, you can do anything you want with those files. You can generate new files up to a certain limit. I think it's 2 gig of space that you actually get, but that's configurable. So there aren't really any limitations. You just have to be logged in. Once you go on there, you can create as many files as you want up to 2 gig using any of these applications. So there isn't really any limitation on that.
Great, thank you. Okay, another one. Would you be able to connect the workspace to a university server or only to cloud storage? I think Andrew's case might be relevant to this because it was sort of both. I know that you had to go a little bit back and forth with your IT, but can you talk about your experience with SharePoint and your own university IT?
Absolutely. So UAB is primarily within the Microsoft environment for kind of online storage. And so one of the biggest spaces that we have to store data is a SharePoint server. So as we were kind of trying to move data between primary acquisition in the lab, it would then go on to SharePoint, and then we had to link it with the cloud workspace, and that was a pretty easy thing to do. So I think there's opportunities to link with other repositories depending on what your university or your own personal storage method is.
Thanks. Yeah, and if something fancier than that were required, like there was a specific server that say somebody had in their physical lab under their desk, and they wanted to connect to it, we would always find a way to make a connection with that. We need to think about the use cases, I think, is the important thing. But yeah, so other than doing workspaces, of course, as a company, we build custom solutions both on front ends and on back ends in terms of pipelines. So we're pretty confident in our abilities to kind of do any custom situation. But if cloud storage can be employed, it just makes it faster, easier for everybody, because then we're reusing a solution that's already there, already paid for. Doesn't cost anybody anything in addition. Okay, let's see. A comment from somebody who wrote in. The interactive shared GUI that works for everyone's Windows, Mac OS, Linux machine is a big gap for high performance computing right now. These cloud workspaces look like a great solution. Thank you. Thank you. Again, I think this is a thing where I don't think we invented anything new. I think we put together some really nice open source technologies in a way that are packaged well, that actually packaging them well just takes some effort to kind of get them all lined up and get them easy to use. But yeah, that's kind of the gap that we saw, and that I think we're helping to fill in a bit for some of these use cases. So appreciate that comment. Another question: how are the front end controls for tools built? Is everything within the Jupyter ecosystem? Do you ever build custom JavaScript front end elements for tools? Yes. Yeah, we can work within Jupyter in a data science context. Usually for data science work that's purely like, I have a data set, I would like to create charts and graphs that I could use to put in a grant, or I could use to put in a paper. Jupyter is sufficient. But for other systems, like computational environments, custom JavaScript front-end elements for tools is what we do on our custom side. So that's just at a different level of effort and time and cost. But yes, we also do that as a company. Okay, let's see, anything else rolled in? I think we're getting towards the end of questions. Have any other questions been inspired since we have been speaking? Okay, great. Well, then with that, let me stop the screen share now. And so, yeah, thanks to everybody. If there are any other questions that come up that you might have in mind, or if you happen to be watching this later, please feel free to contact any of the speakers directly and ask them about their individual resources and tools. They're doing great stuff. Check out their papers. We've got really, really talented folks here that are pushing forward our understanding of the brain and biology. And if you want to get in touch with us, there's lots of places on our website, metacell.us, for you to do that as well. And I'd love to talk to you more about other workspace solutions. Honestly, whether it's using a solution that we've come up with, or whether you're using a different one, but you want to brainstorm about different ways to use it to move research forward, I would love to talk to you. This does not need to be in a context of any kind of a sale, for sure. So thank you so much to all our panelists for providing their use cases and inspiring folks, and hopefully all together here we'll have lots of more interactions on the cloud and do a lot more research collaboration together in the coming months and years. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.